What are the challenges when working with financial service providers, and how can we address them?
Financial service providers can become partners in a humanitarian response. Often they have systems in place and procedures that support large-scale cash interventions. However, we have to keep in mind that FSPs are commercial entities with business interests, whereas for humanitarian organizations, beneficiaries are at the center. Therefore, it's important to make sure that they adhere to our principles such as safeguarding and data protection. A proper protection assessment is essential, where we take the perspective of beneficiaries and analyze where protection and safeguarding risks might arise. During targeting, when beneficiaries receive assistance, when beneficiaries spend the assistance, or of course during monitoring. Based on these findings, cash interventions have to be designed and monitored in order to provide cash assistance in a safe and dignifying manner.
First of all, I think we really need to adjust our expectations. We work very hard, at least in UNHCR, to get the best bank fees that we can to provide cash assistance as efficient as possible. But what we don't often sort of understand is that we need to consider the capacities of the financial service providers. They are keen to get the contract. They often promise things that they may not be able to deliver. And while we are not paying perhaps sufficiently, I mean, sometimes we ask agents to travel 6 hours across a country to a very dangerous place with, you know, a bag of cash. I mean, we need to really address these kind of challenges. What we have found, we have actually documented what are the challenges with working with financial service providers. And some of the challenges that we have seen include, you know, taking additional fees from cash recipients, discrimination, lack of respect, intimidation, humiliation. There are, of course, a lot of liquidity issues, poor quality of banknotes. We have seen a few cases of, you know, risks of abuse or SGBV. Data protection is a key concern. But there are also a lot of mitigation measures that you can take, and some of them we are implementing, such as we have developed a code of conduct for financial service providers. We have introduced some incentives like the mobile agent of the month, for example. And of course, we need to strengthen the contracting with the financial service providers, but also the contracts that the financial service provider have with, for example, mobile agents. Often they don't exist. And we have a joint project actually with WFP and UNHCR on looking into these issues and mitigating the risks of abuse. And we're launching a toolkit which may be helpful shortly.
A lot of challenges. Maybe you know most of them, but I will tell you only one, which is like a specific for Yemen: the internet services. Sometimes the money exchange offices are closed down because of the internet services. In February this year, there was devastated situation of the internet services. And you know, those money exchange services, they are using always on internet because between different towns and governorates in Yemen. So in February this year, actually in 2020, internet went down, and like 90% of the capacity of internet went down. This is why the money transfer services was down for almost a week. 1 week, 7 days. This was a major challenge for all NGOs, for beneficiaries, that they didn't get money during this period.
Financial providers might not be ready to provide what agencies need. Be clear in what you ask and detail your needs. How many people you want to serve, when, how, and how much they have to receive. Sit with them and check if they can support you. Maybe it's not immediate, but they could adapt their service for you. Ask for troubleshooting mechanisms to have a practical solution in case of problems. Organize meeting with their team for them to know and use your own code of conduct and explain which is the aim and the detail of the intervention. Make sure you have a person of reference to maintain a constant and clear communication.
En este caso, en Perú, nosotros trabajamos en el contexto de COVID. Perú, dentro del GHRP, fue solamente priorizado en relación a la situación de movilidad humana de migrantes y refugiados de Venezuela. Entonces, esto ha creado muchos retos, ya que muchas veces los procedimientos y políticas de los proveedores financieros no están adaptados para trabajar con población migrante refugiada, menos cuando la documentación no está en regla, menos cuando la documentación no es válida, cuando ya pasó el tiempo de validez. Entonces, ese es un desafío muy importante. Por un lado, por el tema de los proveedores financieros. Soluciones le hemos encontrado, le estamos encontrando. Algunas cuestan más, algunas son más difíciles, pero soluciones le encontramos. Sin embargo, estos desafíos se mitigan si es que nosotros flexibilizamos también nuestros procedimientos administrativos. Es un reto, pero es a lo que creo deberíamos de apuntar. Muchas veces, y algo que nos ha tocado hacer, es ir de cero. Ir con un proveedor, con un supermercado y decirle, mira, esto es una ONG, así entra el presupuesto, así hay que gastarlo, estos son nuestros beneficiarios, este es el tiempo, estas son las formas. Ellos nos miraban como empresa, decían, ya dame tu lista de trabajadores, ya no, aguanta, esto no es así. Proveedores financieros que, por ejemplo, nos decían, ya, créale una cuenta a todos los beneficiarios. Ya, eso no funciona de esa manera. Entonces, creo que ese es el desafío. Y la forma de mitigarlo es que nuestro equipo a la interna, como bien lo menciona aquí Lisette de nuestro equipo, si nuestros procesos administrativos son flexibles y se adaptan al asunto, entonces va a ser mucho más probable que cuando nos encontremos con un proveedor de un servicio financiero, pues nuestras formas y nuestros límites se adapten a los de ellos. Y efectivamente lo hemos logrado, repito, con mayor o menor reto, pero vamos, en eso estamos.
So the key point here is realizing that FSPs are not your partner, you are their client. The moment you sign a contract with an FSP, the moment you commit yourself to the terms there, you're locked in. And this can be very different, and that can lock in an element of your program model that, unlike vouchers or in kind, you're not going to have where you can learn and change your program design. In this case, what you've committed, they're going to stick to. And they're not going to change without potentially a renegotiation and additional money, even if it is easy for them to do. Again, there's a difference between being a client and being a partner. The financial service providers make most of their money, often, through arbitrage from foreign exchange changes. So that's an important distinction. If you are paying in a foreign currency to a financial service provider, they will be making money from making that transaction from the hard currency to the local currency. This is not always the case. And in most cases, it's not, to the example, but when it is, you have to recognize that if an FSP in a tender may be giving you a very cheap option, but may then be giving you a very bad exchange rate, so that they may offer you, you have 3 FSPs and 2 FSPs are giving you a very good exchange rate, and the third one is giving you a very bad exchange rate, but those 2 ones are having to charge you usage fees or access fees or loading fees, and the third one doesn't. So again, it's how you tender your request for procurement. If you are going to be paying not in the local currency, then making sure that in the request for procurement that the exchange rate will be, if they are responsible, that there's an independent benchmark that you can reference there, so that you are not ending up losing money on the other side, and that you are able to correctly score the FSP during the procurement process.
I think in my experience, one of the challenges is actually, I want to zoom in on the attitudes. And very often in engaging with FSPs, there's a tendency to have this us and them attitude. And, you would often talking to humanitarian colleagues, they would be thinking about FSPs are only driven by profit, which actually isn't always true, although it's partially true, but also equally the FSPs would be saying, well, humanitarians often operate a black box. Why don't they just openly tell us what is it that they're trying to achieve? So I would say that's kind of establishing good means of communication and dialogue with your FSP from the start, and having things like a dedicated focal point on either side, thinking about it in project management terms. How often are you going to update each other? How open can you be in your project objectives, your caseloads, you know, even your donor requirements for reporting? These are the things to think about. One of the challenges is that we don't think about scale in the same terms. So what is scale for them? For FSPs, especially if it's a national level provider. I once had a conversation with a global provider for whom 5,000 caseload is, they will not even look at it twice. It is so small. So that's something to remember. How can you make a case for them? What is going to be unique? Why would they want to work with you? What would motivate them? This is something to think about.
As Red Rose, we have performed many integrations with FSPs on behalf of individual NGOs or on behalf of programs in particular. And there's some common themes that come up. And a big one that we observe is this challenge and value for money that we see with using FSPs. It can be an expensive approach when each individual program is having to contract the FSP separately and independently. They can't take advantage of maybe some volume pricing models or things like this. And we've begun now working with more consortiums. And that's a great first step because consortiums can really leverage volume to increase value for money with FSPs. But I think there's more opportunity. And as a service provider, I think that we have a better opportunity to support more CVA programs, whether they're consortiums or independent, in a way that can decrease the cost and continue to increase the value for money. And what that means is, you know, what we could do differently is we're very interested in partnerships that can drive towards that goal. So actually, we love it when partners reach out to us and say, here's the challenge, let's tackle it together. So that happens in a couple of different ways. One, if we are more in the design phase when programs are just starting, we can help with some ideas and some learnings that we have from across the sector to do things differently. But also, if you're in the project design phase, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to work together in a different way to create a model that really shows the value of scale, the value of bulk buying, if you will, to basically get better pricing and then put more in the hands of the beneficiary and less in terms of fees, let's say.
One of the greatest challenges we see in the field is particularly when a disruption within a country occurs, is that the traditional banking methods, the traditional structure can be damaged. Lebanon is a very good example currently at the moment, but there are plenty of other examples where banking systems have failed. And if NGOs, if donors, if payers are purely limited to one financial service provider, that service provider may in fact go down, and in which case the whole of the infrastructure suffers. In Lebanon, just go back to that point, we have three service providers, which is a money exchange, is a mobile wallet, and a post office as well. And those are just three examples of touch out points that give us a certain amount of resilience. And just to be very specific, we actually have a video of one of our service outlets actually being affected by that blast. But then we had another 50 or 60 in the different areas which could be utilized by those people.
Buenos días. A la pregunta de qué retos surgen a la hora de trabajar con los proveedores de servicios financieros, hemos identificado tres: costos, atención y cobertura. ¿Qué hemos hecho para mitigarlos? Para el caso de los costos, es clave la negociación con la entidad financiera. Allí siempre será importante no negociemos un solo producto, sino los servicios que nos pueda ofrecer la entidad financiera y que se ajusten a las necesidades de la organización con el fin de contar con la calidad del producto que estamos necesitando. Cobertura y atención. Para este caso siempre será importante contemos con más de un proveedor financiero. 2 o 3 marcan la diferencia. Esto nos ayudará a asegurar a nivel nacional la cobertura de lo que necesitamos y la atención al 100% de nuestros beneficiarios. Gracias.
It is best to set up relationships with financial service providers before an emergency. Having a contract in place that outlines the payment methods, avoid delays when you're ready to do a cash distribution. It is also very beneficial to already have the financial service provider sign and understand the code of conduct to ensure the protection of beneficiaries.